Radio is theater of the mind. There's nothing that I won't describe. If I smell popcorn, I'm going to talk about, man, that popcorn smelled good, whatever it might be. And if somebody doesn't like it, that's why God had this dial put on the radio so you can change the channel.
This episode of Beat Everyone is brought to you by Broadway Joe's Fantasy Sports. Inspired by football legend Joe Namath, embrace the thrill of daily fantasy sports like never before in an app coming this fall.
Welcome, everybody, to Beat Everyone. I am Ben Flanagan. I'm here with AL.com's Michael Casagrande, and we're back for another edition of the Golden Age with the one and only Eli Gold, longtime voice of the Crimson Tide. Eli, how you doing?
I am well. Thank you for the kind intro. I appreciate it.
So this week we're going to talk about your process.
My process.
Yeah, the process, maybe a process.
A process. The process belongs to Nick Saban.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. Long time, in broadcasting, not just covering Alabama. You're a professional. You're propping us. You're making us look good on this show, or better than we normally would with your professionalism. But we wanted to talk about how you call a game. And can you kind of take us through a week of how you prepare to call a football game?
Well, depending on what my week looks like and how many games I have to do, normally if I have a Saturday Bama game, I would then go to a Sunday NFL game and do the radio wherever they sent me. And then I would fly home either Sunday night if I could or Monday morning. And then I'd begin my preparation for the following weekend's Alabama game. My week is very, very short. I chose to have every bit of preparation done by the time I sat down with Nick Saban on Thursday night. I didn't want him to bring up something that I wasn't prepared to converse with him on that subject. Not that he ever necessarily asked my opinion, but if he talked about this running back, that defensive back, this guy, for either team, I wanted to be able to have my charts done, my information ready, so I was able to, to prepare and sound like I know what I'm talking about. So my week began on Monday, first thing Monday morning, and I would get the rosters, for the other team. I wasn't so concerned with Alabama. I knew those guys, but I'd get the roster for the other team. I'd get biographical information. I'd get everything that I needed, their stats from the week prior and their seasonal stats, and I'd send all of that out to a gentleman in Harrisonburg, Virginia, and he puts together my spotting chart. Spotting chart is this big, it's 2 11 by 17 pieces of paper on this side of a board. Then you flip it over. There's 2 others on the other. It's Alabama's offense and the other team's defense, and vice versa, the other team's offense and the Alabama defense. And I would get all of that information together on Monday. Plus, on Monday, I would also write the tease, the opening tease to the Nick Saban show on Thursday. And I would write the tease for Saturday's ball game. So, it would be a 7 a.m. to 5 or 6 p.m. Monday for me. There was just a lot to get done. Now, Tuesday and Wednesday, I will just begin memorizing names, numbers, and I would just continue to go through the game notes, the newspapers. I'd call people. If I knew the play-by-play guy very well from the other team, I would call him just to get information. Any way I could pick up little tidbits. Then Thursday, the same thing. Somewhere in there, I would go to practice. There wasn't one set day. Often it would be Thursday before I did the Nick Saban show. I'd run to the practice field. Then I would stay over in Tuscaloosa for a home game after Thursday, and Friday I would either host the Nick Saban luncheon, the Nick at noon, or whatever it might be. But all the while, you're picking up little tidbits of news as, they come out. Sometimes right out of your columns on AL.com, whatever it might be. So that's how I did it. Now, if I was also doing an NFL game on Sundays, which was often the case, I would have to do double the prep. So I would get up and I'd be in my office at 5 o'clock in the morning, and I would work until 7 o'clock at night. You know, I'd come upstairs. My office is in the house and the studio is in the house. I'd come upstairs, you know, for a short while, but otherwise I'd go back and work. And when I left the house on Thursday to go to Tuscaloosa, I was prepared for 1 or 2 football games. And and the games are the easy part. Games are the easy part. It's the preparation. But if you don't do your preparation, you're in a world of hurt. No broadcast is tough if you've done your homework.
Eli, what are you watching? Like when you're calling a game, where are your eyes?
My eyes are on the football.
On the football?
Yes, my eyes are on the football. My spotter, Butch Owens, who's been with me for 36 years now, his responsibility is the tackler. He will keep a big eye out and who's making the tackle. And on that big chart of mine, he would reach over and point to the guy who made the tackle in case I was looking at something else. And then if I did not describe something to its fullest, you know, I'd say whoever the running back was, he went around left end, turned it up, and, you know, tippy-toed down the left sideline for 22 yards. And if I didn't see who made that block on the corner to allow him to turn the corner, Butch would point to that guy and go like this. All of this is obviously silent communication. And, or whatever happened, if I missed if somebody bobbled the ball, you know, Butch would go like this. We had developed all of that over the years. But, you know, so I look at the football. I can't lose sight of the football. I'll start every play, I start every play with my binoculars up. If it's going to be clearly a running play, I keep my binoculars in place, and I just follow the running back or whomever it is with the ball and do it that way. If it's going to be a pass play, I immediately pull my binoculars down, and I will scan the field, see where the receivers are and where the defenders are, and call it that way. So things vary from play to play, whether I'm using the binoculars or not. But I've always got them in place for the snap of the ball.
Got to ask you about this. What's the hardest name to pronounce that you've ever had to say quickly?
Oh, goodness. I remember Piso Tinoi Samoa, the middle linebacker for Hawaii, was not that difficult, but I used to chuckle because I was waiting to hear Snake pronounce it. Kenny Stabler, the Snake, was my color man. And Snake, it started with Piso, then it became Pizza, then it became Mr. P, and it degenerated from there. So I'm lucky. I will spell names like that. I will spell them in a contrasting color on this chart, in a contrasting color phonetically. So, you know, I'm sure I've blown some names over the years. I just don't think about it that often. But it's usually Hawaii, Utah State, you know, schools of that nature that have a heavy Tongan presence, a Samoan-based roster, something like that, is where I would have the occasional double or triple clutch before I spit something out.
Sticking with vocabulary for a second, it seems like a play-by-play man has to be a walking thesaurus in a lot of ways, because, I mean, even earlier you said tippy-toed, you said bobbled, you said turned it upfield. It seems like you can either repeat yourself or you have to think of other ways to describe what's happening because you're talking to a listening audience.
Yeah.
How do you keep from repeating yourself and saying the same thing over and over? Is that just something you always had a knack for words, or is that something you developed as a broadcaster?
I honestly don't know. I guess I developed it. I don't know if I had that knack when I started as a teenager. You know, I started broadcasting when I was 15 and a half years old. So it I'm sure that developed over the years. But the fact that you don't want to reuse stuff, that's things that I guess I've taught myself. And sometimes you do reuse things if it's, if it's correct to do so. But I guess it's something I learned over the course of my career.
Is there something that the average listener would be surprised to know about your process, or how the magic of radio comes together?
It's, people always say, how do you know that? How the heck did you know that? It's because you prepare. There's no magic wand. You either have it and know it, or you don't. I learned from one of the great preparers, Kevin Harlan, who works for CBS and Turner, a lot of things. I listened. I love his work. His voice is just captivating. But I love I learned that, for instance, I used to say, quarterback's in the shotgun. Here's the snap, yada, 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 whatever it is. Well, Kevin Harlan, that wasn't enough. He would say, here's the snap, it's belt high. It's chest high. He reaches to his right or to his left or reaches down low. And I added that to my descriptive because there's nothing that happens that is too small to not be described. Radio is theater of the mind. This is what we do. You've got to think that you're talking to the blind person. You're talking not to the people at the stadium. You're talking to the people who are not there. You've got to describe the color of everything, the smells. That's why I refuse to work behind a closed glass. We did a game. I did an NFL game at MetLife Stadium in East Rutherford, New Jersey. It was the Giants and somebody, doesn't matter whom. It was -2 degrees outside. And I sent the guys a note during the week, the guys who were going to be in the booth with me. I said, I believe it's going to be very, very cold on Sunday. Make sure you're dressed appropriately because the windows will be open. I just won't work behind glass. Number one, it doesn't sound good because I have a strong voice and the sound will bounce off the glass and come back into your microphone, and it just doesn't sound good. But number two, I need to feel the game. I need to feel what the fans are feeling, what the players are feeling. So there's nothing that's too minute not to describe. People say, we know what the Alabama colors are. Well, I'm not saying it for you. I'm saying it for we've gotten so many texts over the years, military people, at some Air Force base, some godforsaken place where they're defending our country. And, they want to hear the colors of the uniforms. They want to hear everything. They want to be transported to the 50-yard line of that event. There is nothing. It's not enough to say it's a gray sky. It's a pewter gray sky or whatever it is. People say, why do you say that they just turned the lights on? Because they did. And chances are somebody in this stadium is sitting next to his buddy and said, hey, they just turned the lights on. I said, nothing too small that can't be described.
Eli, we're going to hear from a fan now. If you want to ask Eli a question, leave us a voicemail at 205-523-4809. Let's hear it.
Hey, Eli, this is Brian Oliu. I am calling you from the frigid north of St. Paul, Minnesota. One of the things I always appreciated, especially since I have become an expat from Alabama, is your scene setting and how you are able to talk a little bit before the game, mention, the weather, how it feels, even just down to the uniform combinations that we wear as well as what our opponents wear. And I just wanted to kind of hear a little bit about your process going into that. Is it something that you do some research ahead of time? Is it something that you plan ahead for? Is it something that just kind of a little bit, some notes, and then spur of the moment, just go, go, go? But yeah, just wanted to hear your thoughts on that, and I appreciate it. Roll Tide.
Well, thank you, Roll Tide, and great to hear from our friends up in the Twin Cities. As we were saying before that call came in, there's nothing that shouldn't be described. If I notice it, then there are others who are noticing it, whatever it is. So, yes, yes, everybody knows Alabama's uniforms. They haven't changed in forever. But if you're playing a visiting team, if you're playing Coastal Carolina, for instance, well, do you know what the Chanticleers' uniforms look like? Chances are you don't. So you describe them. And that's what makes it come alive to those who can't be there. I am working for the folks who can't be there, who can't see, who can't, participate as a sighted fan would. There's nothing that I won't describe. If I smell popcorn, I'm going to talk about, man, that popcorn smelled good, whatever it might be. And if somebody doesn't like it, that's why God had this dial put on the radio so you can change the channel. But I'm going to describe everything. I really am.
Thank you for the call. And again, if you want to leave us a voicemail, 205-523-4809. Eli, we're going to take a break. More from Beat Everyone and the Golden Age coming up soon. We're back on Beat Everyone. It is the Golden Age with the one and only Eli Gold. Michael.
Yeah, Eli, just wondering, we always hear about Nick Saban has the lucky penny, he has all these superstitions about games. Do you have a superstition or anything that you have going into a game, or you're just relying on the talent and the skill that you have?
I just don't know if it's talent or skill, but I don't have any lucky anything. No rabbit's feet or anything like that. I just do my work. I rely on my work. I rely on my Monday through Friday preparations to get me through that Saturday. I rely on my work for baseball, whatever it might be, whatever sport I'm doing, hockey, anything. I'm a compulsive preparer. Hopefully nothing will happen that I'm not prepared to talk about.
On that note, and I get in this debate all the time with fans, do you believe in a jinx? Do you believe that saying something can jinx? That's hocus pocus? Because I can tell other people now that Eli Gold doesn't believe in a jinx. That you can't say something before it happens.
So you feel fine about saying, Will Reichert is 16 for 16 before this kick right here.
He is.
Yes, because he is. And it's my job to describe the facts. I didn't make that up.
So you a jinx guy?
No, I mean, you asked the question.
No,
right?
I have no problem with that. I never have. When I do a baseball broadcast, if a guy's throwing a no-hitter or something, you don't necessarily always have to beat it to death. You don't have to necessarily call it a no-hitter. You can say he's faced 20 guys and he's retired all 20. There's ways to say things to, that a cognizant sports fan will pick up on. But no, I have no superstitions whatsoever. I'm just sitting here thinking, and nothing comes to mind.
So there's no unwritten rules or anything like that among broadcasters, like when it comes to jinxing or anything.
Maybe
like
for
that.
some people,
not you.
Not for me. No, sir.
Good. Yeah, I appreciate that. I get so tired of people telling me I'm jinxing somebody for.
Yeah.
You post something on Twitter
now,
during the famous game. What are we doing?
The famous Casagrande jinx is something totally different, but we'll talk about that in another episode.
Oh, good tease.
You talked about preparation. It's prepare. When it comes to big calls, let's say, and I'm sure your definition of a big call is different from ours maybe, but when it comes to big calls and, anticipating what might be a big play or a big moment, do you write those? Do you rehearse them? Is everything off the cuff? Like how prepared are you?
Well, the only thing I ever think about is in a championship game setting, national championship, of which there, for me, have been many. There has been thought about how would I will I wrap up the broadcast if Alabama wins? Okay? Now, boys and girls, hide your eyes here because I don't want to burn your retinas. But picture this. I'm in the shower on game day morning. It's a true story. And I do some of my best thinking in the shower on game day morning. And this, again, is for a championship game. What's the significance? I know that. But what would make this special? What would make this stand out? I knew that, for instance, when Alabama played Texas at the Rose Bowl Stadium in Pasadena a number of years ago, somehow I wanted to tie in Alabama's history with the Rose Bowl Stadium. And remember, back in the day when Alabama went out west to play in the Rose Bowl, there was scant little regard for Southern football. The West Coast was the power of college football in those days. And Alabama goes out west and wins.
You remember it well.
No, I wasn't there. Thank you very much. But Bama goes out there and wins. And I said to myself, I've got to try and tie that back in because that would be cool. That would be neat. And I just kept that in my mind. I didn't write anything down. I didn't know what I was going to say. I had no pre-planning other than I wanted to find a way to tie it all together. And then Bama wins. And I opened my mouth and I said, and the roses in this grand old stadium are once again crimson. Where did that come from? I have no idea.
That must have felt good after you hit that one.
It did. I said,
just give like a.
I said to myself,
Nailed
damn, that was all right. There are certain things like that, but you have to, but then conversely, when Alabama beat Georgia on Tua's pass to Devontae for the national championship, well, there was no pre-planning. And quite honestly, I didn't have anything planned, even if Bama had won by 40. The game was in Atlanta. It wasn't any place new. Bama had been there before. And of course, the Tide did not play well. People always say, man, that was a great game. I said, no, the game sucked.
Terrible game, great ending.
Yeah, the great ending. Game sucked. But I'm sitting there, and here's the sack. And you're lower than whale dung. I mean, that's how you feel. And you say to yourself, well, that's not good. And then seconds later, touchdown, Bama wins the national championship. Well, I had no time to prepare anything. So I did what I thought was a good thing, and it played well. I automatically listed Nick Saban's accomplishments. Bama wins another national championship for Nick Saban. It's national title number 6. It ties him with Bear Bryant. Did this. Alabama is again the champion of college football. And my voice ended up on that upward lilt. And I said to myself, and this is all going on live, and I said to myself, well, that's going to sound like hell if I don't add to that cut somehow, because people are going to play that. And it's going to be, Alabama, the champion of college football. And I said, say something. I'm saying this to myself. And for some reason, I thought about the great New York Yankees announcer, Mel Allen.
Good call.
Who was a former voice of the Alabama Crimson Tide. A lot of folks don't realize that. But when Mel was in Alabama, he's from Bessemer, he was the voice of the Crimson Tide. So I said, champions of college football, how about that? And that was his famous saying, and it put a nice wrapper on the cut, and I was real pleased with that. So, when Bama won a national title in Miami against Notre Dame, I talked about and the Crimson Tide rolled up onto South Beach, bringing with it national title number 15. It's just, you just kind of put little seeds in your brain. And I did it early in the morning in the shower. And then I said, well, I don't know if that'll play. And of course, that game, as we remember, it was over early. Phil Savage and I were telling stories in the first quarter. That thing was over early. So, it's there have been some great calls, but are they formally scripted? No.
Please tell me that you've heard the Georgia radio announcers
I have.
Of the Tua to Devontae Smith.
Karma's terrible, isn't it?
On that note, do you consider yourself, or have you ever been described as a homer when it comes to Alabama? Like, you're the home broadcast, but how do you balance calling it straight and sort of like sprinkling in fandom and like fan angles?
I always thought I did that well. I was not a homer, but I certainly favored Alabama. And there's a difference. Bob Prince, the great voice of the Pittsburgh Pirates of years gone by, he would say, Ramon Hernandez would come in the pitch out of the bullpen and go, come on, Moni, we just need one more strike here. I'm not going to do that. I'm not I'm not out there sweating from places I didn't even know I had in the middle of the summer. I have no right to be we. I have no right to be us. That's something I always learned from Marv Albert growing up listening to him. He never talked about the Knicks and the Rangers as we or us. And that's who I learned a lot of my on-air presence from. But at the same time, I'll say, and the good guys are up by 2 touchdowns, because there's no question you're listening to the Alabama broadcast. But I'm not going to say we're up by 2 touchdowns, because I ain't part of we. I don't play. I don't sweat. I don't, get beat up out there. I have no right to put myself on that roster. But, the good guys, sure, I'll do that. But I don't think I've been a sickening homer over the years. I don't think there's any question you're listening to the Crimson Tide broadcast when you were listening to us, but at the same time, it was not at all like a sickening homer.
Did you have a favorite name to say?
There were so many of them. I always used to laugh, though. I'd love when Salim Rashid would make a play. Remember him, the linebacker?
Absolutely.
Went on to play for the 49ers. The reason I loved that is because Kenny Stabler was my color man, and Snake could not remember Salim Rashid. He would call him Abdul Salam. He'd call him Abdul Aziz. He'd call him every name that you could think of that had a Middle East twang to it. God forbid he should call him his real name. And I said, but you know what? The fans knew that and they loved it. So when Snake say, well, Eli Abdul Salam made a hell of a play right there. And they knew he was talking about Salim Rashid, and that's just, so I always enjoyed that. But no, I don't know if there was a favorite name.
On that note, we can stick with Snake for just a second.
Sure.
What makes a good color man? Like, how does he help you do your job, and who did that?
Snake was one of the very best. Phil Savage was also one of the very, very best. Anybody who played the game was one of the very, very best. Because as we all know, and I've talked about it on the air, the next snap I take is going to be my first. There's no way that I am going to analyze a play if I got Kenny Stabler sitting next to me. In what right do I have to analyze a play when I got a Hall of Fame quarterback sitting next to me, or even before he made the Hall, a Super Bowl winning quarterback? What right do I have to analyze something when I've got an NFL GM sitting next to me? I don't have that right. But those guys do. So I would lean on them very heavily. And I said, and they would know going in, said, you guys will talk unless I have to sell something advertising-wise. I said, you will talk if you want to after every single play. And they did. They were the star of the show. I was the one who maybe got more airtime because of the descriptions of my job, but those guys were the stars of the show. Kenny Stabler was just spectacular. Now, granted, some of the stuff he said was this close to helping us lose a license, but we never did.
Can you give us a little more of Kenny real quick? Because, you brought him to life just now. What's an example of Kenny, helping you out?
We're sitting there one day, and we were on the road somewhere, and Bama was winning big, just winning big. And I forget exactly what the exact words were from me, but it was along the lines of, man, Snake, this is, quite a spanking by the Tide today. And he said, yeah, he said, it's awful quiet in here. He said, I believe you could hear an elephant peeing on a cotton ball. That's Kenny always had something along those lines to add. But, but he was good. He would sit there, and it's funny about preparation. I talked about my charts and all of that stuff. Snake would come in. Now, he prepared during the week. He'd read the papers. He'd keep up with stuff. But he'd come in with a yellow legal pad and a pen. And he'd throw it down on the table, and he was ready to go. And then all these plays would take place, and he would start diagramming like a quarterback would. The other team had a 3rd and 8 on one of their first possessions, and Snake would diagram it, and that's it. We went on about our business, and he'd analyze what have you. Then later in the day, they have another 3rd and 8, and Snake would remember. He said, "Yeah, we saw that." He's licking his paper and getting back to it. He said, "Now remember, back in the opening quarter, they did this, and this on a 3rd and 8, and son of a gun, they did it again." But he would say, "But here's how you got to stop that." And da-da-da-da-da, and son of a gun, if Alabama didn't stop it, just the way Kenny said. A mind, I've sat in meetings, not even a meeting, it was more just a couple of guys getting together. I sat with Phil Savage and Nick Saban. And Phil was the general manager of the Cleveland Browns in his pre-Alabama life, and Coach Saban is Coach Saban. And then I was there. I was like the 3rd wheel for some reason. I forget what the deal was. But they start talking about something. They might as well have been talking about cricket. They might as well have been talking about, some bizarre game. I had no idea what they were saying. The terms they were using, this and this and this and this. And as we walked out finally, and I'm alone, I said, "Phil," I said, "could you translate any of that?" I said, "What is that in English?" He said, "Well, we were talking about this. And, I like to think I have a decent working knowledge of football. I was totally lost. I was lost in the dust behind those guys. That's why I rely so heavily on the analyst. Because, again, I know what I don't know. I know what I don't know. And I'm not going to try and fool a knowledgeable listening audience who can then see through me and say, "Well, that boy's full of crap." I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to defer to the man who won a Super Bowl for the Oakland Raiders.
I can still hear him saying your name, right?
Yeah.
Eli. I love it. I love it.
I remember one of my favorite cuts. Bama wins the SEC championship. No, Bama wins the Iron Bowl, and Snake goes, "We're going to Atlanta." And in talking about the SEC championship game, Kenny was a wonderful guy. He was funny as all get out. Funny. And for the record, the man never, ever showed up impaired. Ever showed. Now, I can't say what he did Monday through Sunday, other than the Saturday, but the man never showed up impaired. He was always prepared and was wonderful to deal with. And, of course, the other coaches and players, they respected him so that, you'd walk in somewhere with Snake. It's like, walking into a rock concert with Paul McCartney. It's just, you can't imagine.
Need to do an episode with Eli bullying character as Ken Stabler. I think
there you go.
I would tune in for that one.
That won't be the last time we hear from Ken Stabler. I guarantee you
Probably
that.
not.
My last thing
there are
for
many
you,
other stories.
Eli, what are your go-to pregame and postgame meals when you're calling a game?
Well, as you can tell by my avoirdupois, there are many pregame meals. When we go to a different city, we're not going to go to a fast food joint. We're not going to go to a chain restaurant. We're going to go to someplace really good. I can't tell you, what is this, 2024? I'm probably into meal money now for the year 2047. I'm just so far in the debt. We just love good. Tom Stipe, myself, we just go to the best restaurant around. That's just the way we do it. After the game, I'll go with the family to Baumhauer's or something in Tuscaloosa, or someplace similar to that on the road, when you're wherever you might be. But no, we don't do, and I'm not going to name any names. We don't do any chains, though. We go to the best that the locals have to offer. That's just part of the fun of traveling.
It is.
Yeah.
Eli, awesome stuff, as always. Thank you so much for doing this. We're going to do it again soon.
My pleasure. Now, for next week, you've got to cater from some of those restaurants. That's your assignment. Well, I'll give you a list as soon as we wrap up.
We have producers for that, Eli.
There you go. There you go.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Eli. If you've got a question for Eli, please leave us a voicemail, 205-523-4809. Subscribe to Beat Everyone on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. And for Michael Casagrande, I'm Ben Flanagan. Thank you so much. This episode of Beat Everyone is brought to you by Broadway Joe's Fantasy Sports. Inspired by football legend Joe Namath, embrace the thrill of daily fantasy sports like never before in an app coming this fall.